is Terry Carter, and I'm with the University of Georgia's Family and Consumer Science Department. Today we have a really fascinating program for you today. We're going to be exploring the food history of African Americans in the South. This is a really interesting program because we all think about Southern food, we think of it as comfort food, and we've always heard how great Southern food is. We don't hear anything about Northern food, Eastern food, or Western food, but it's always Southern food. So I decided to kind of explore the history of this food and to see what it's all about and where did it start. So to really understand the food history, I started to look at what my parents and grandparents were cooking and how did these foods become so famous in the kitchens of the South. So to really understand that, we have to go all the way back to the beginning of America. We look at three separate groups: the Native Americans, the European Americans, and the African Americans. All three of these groups came together to bring the food history of the South as we know it today. So let's look at what each group actually contributed. When the Europeans came to America, they brought domesticated animals with them. Prior to that, the Native Americans were mostly hunters, gatherers, fishermen, and they were also growing food. Now, the method of growing food that the Native Americans used was called the Three Sisters method of planting. And the Three Sisters method of planting is really interesting because what it does is it takes three different plants and plant them together. Now, the Three Sisters consist of one, the oldest sister, which I call the corn, because the corn is what you would plant first. You would plant that one and it grows up. Then the second sister would be squash or pumpkin. They'll grow on the ground to cover the ground, to keep any weeds from growing, and to also provide a little protection from the sun for those roots. Also, we have the next sister. That will be the beans. So you have the one corn stalk going up, you have the squash growing down on the ground, and then you have the beans. The beans will wrap around the corn and grow up. Hence, you have the Three Sisters method of planting. This was very popular for a long time, and it continues to be a method of very effective planting. Then you have the African Americans, and I think their contribution we have most of today. We really want to look at how the African Americans contributed to the foods of the South. First of all, we have to go back all the way to Africa and what was brought over on the slave ships. Those initial slave ships actually had to have food and provisions for all of the African Americans that they were bringing to the New World, as well as the crew. So how were these people fed? Well, they were fed by provisions that were gathered when they were in Africa loading up the ships. Now, the main thing that was on those ships would have been three things: the yam, and this is a yam. We think of yams as sweet potatoes. Here in America, we really don't eat yams. In other countries, as well as Africa, Central America, South America, and many, many countries around the world, the yam is still a #1 staple. But what we grow here in the South is the sweet potato. And as you can see, the sweet potato and the yam look quite different. They taste quite different, and they're grown quite differently. For one, the yam did not grow in America once those ships arrived here. No matter how hard they tried, they couldn't get it to grow. It's a different kind of soil, and it never took. Well, it did take well in the Caribbean as well as in Brazil. It's still grown there, and it's grown as a staple crop, and it's called a subsistence crop, meaning that it's a way to provide food for people who are poor and have a difficult time paying for food. This is something that can be grown. The root can be dug up and replanted again. It's made into a flour. It can be boiled. It can be fried. Now, the outer skin is very poisonous, so that skin has to be removed. So it's very important that if you're using this, that you make sure you properly remove that skin. It's called the cassava root or the yucca. Some people say yucca, but it's actually yucca or cassava manioc. So it goes by many different names depending on where you are in the world. It could be called something different. Now, we also have other things that were brought over on those ships. This is millet. Millet is a grain that we don't hear very much about, but millet is another one of those subsistence crop that was grown in Africa, easily grown. It has a very quick growing season, so it could be replenished very often. The millet is an ancient grain, as we call them, so it has to be milled or husked before it can be used. Now, the thing about millet is it was brought over on the slave ships, and millet can be grown here in the U.S. as well, because if the grains were left unhulled on that journey, then the seeds could be planted. But if it had been hulled, then it was useless as a seed and you had to eat it as a grain. So we also have sorghum. We have sorghum flour here. Sorghum was a very important grain as well, and it is still grown in many parts of the South, especially in the Carolinas. This is sorghum flour that has been ground down. Now, we also have something we call sorghum syrup, and sorghum syrup is still made here. And I love sorghum syrup, but it is a bit difficult to find these days. Also, we want to look at what else was brought on those slave ships. We had rice. Here we have what we call black rice. And the black rice may be very unfamiliar to many of us. We're not used to that. We're used to basically white rice and brown rice. But black rice was grown in Africa, and as well as many other kinds of rice. Rice had been cultivated in Africa for many, many hundreds of years. So when these early African Americans came to the States as we know them today, they already had the rice cultivating techniques. Most of the Africans that came to America, they came from West Africa, and that is an agricultural region, so they had a lot of skills already at producing food, growing rice, growing the millet, growing the sorghum, as well as many other vegetables. Also important, especially once in the South, are field peas. Now, field peas go by several different names. I've heard them called cowpeas, and I believe that the name cowpea and field pea can be used interchangeably. It's just a word to describe peas that are generally small, grown further away from the garden, near the edge of the garden, because they require a lot of space to grow. So you want to give them space where they can run if they are runner type bean. The field pea is a very small pea, and therefore it's very quick cooking. Now, the field pea could be eaten fresh or it could be eaten dried. And we also have pigeon peas. Pigeon peas are very popular still in the Caribbean, West Indies, South America. The pigeon pea is easy to grow, and it is a #1 pea still in Africa. So pigeon peas too can also be eaten fresh or dry. Now, the difference between fresh peas and dried peas, and why we actually have fresh or dry. Well, because when the peas are first harvested, or not even being harvested, when the peas are grown and they've reached maturity, they are considered peas that are fresh. Once they dry on the vine, or you take them and dry them, then they're called dried peas. Now, what we have here, and I want to show you, is an example of the peas that have dried. And once they dry, this is what we have. We have the peas inside. Now, this is very versatile because with the fresh peas, they're much quicker to cook and very tasty. But with the dried peas, the early Africans and people in the South were able to dry that pea, store that pea, and cook it at a later date. So that was really important in being able to have a pea that will withstand the drought, the dry temperatures, and sometimes very bad soil here in the South. And also, when you dry these, you now have the seeds to plant for the next season. So saving those seeds would have been very, very important early on. And to go along with the peas, of course, we have okra. And I have fresh okra here. Okra is a very, very important staple here still in the South. We use it all the time as a side dish to our vegetables. But okra was used mostly as a thickener back in Africa. Even here in Louisiana, they still use okra as your thickener in many soups and many stews. And what I have here is the okra that has been allowed to dry. This is a very long piece, and once it gets to be this size, we wouldn't want to cook with it. This is just used as a seed stock, meaning we would save this and we would use the seeds. And so easy to dry your seeds and save them for the next year. So all you would do, and I didn't want these, if you look here, you'll see that it's full of seeds. So there are more than enough seeds to replant for the next year. So you can save those seeds either in here or take them out and save them. Also, With our okra, we have a lot of greens that are very, very famous here in the South. Now, growing greens in the South is really easy. It's something that can be done almost year-round. You can start very early in the year, setting out seeds. You can also do another planting of seeds late in the year for a fall harvest, and many of the greens will make it through winter and overwinter. Now, what we have today, we have turnip greens. We have turnip greens growing in the South. We have collard greens. We have mustard greens. All of these different greens were greens that the early settlers would have eaten. And with the greens, I especially like turnip greens because with the turnip green, you have an extra value in that you have the turnip root. So after you pick your greens, and you leave that initial root in the ground, you can come back and harvest the turnip root at a later time. The turnip root is delicious boiled. And next to the turnip root, we have one of my favorite root vegetables of all time, which is the rutabaga. The rutabaga has lost a little bit's glamour in recent days, but I'm a really, really big fan of the rutabaga. This one, as you can see, is a little bit larger than the turnip root, but still all in the same family. The rutabaga has a coating on it of wax, so before you cook this, you'll have to peel it and remove that waxy coat. And it is really delicious, and it's going to taste a little bit different from your turnip root. The rutabaga has more of a tan color to it, and it's much sweeter, whereas the rutabaga is more of a white color and not quite as sweet as the rutabaga. And also, I can't do this program without mentioning something that is rather controversial, is the ham hock. Now, the ham hock is very important in Southern cooking, whether you like it or not, whether you're a vegan, vegetarian, or a meat eater, or one of those people who absolutely will not touch or look at a piece of pork. Well, we have to talk about it because the ham hock was extremely important in cooking. Now, the ham hock was not necessarily used to eat. It wasn't something that they put in the pot and said, oh, we're going to eat the ham hock. It was used as a flavoring. If you had a large pot of greens or if you had a large pot of peas, you needed something other than just salt and pepper to season the pot. So the ham hock would have been that. And early African American slaves were given a ration basically with cornmeal and fatback, and that is what their diet was consistent of, except for the fact that many of them were allowed to have gardens, and in those gardens they were allowed to grow many of the vegetables that we see here today. And by doing so, they were given a really, they weren't given, but they were had the opportunity to have a better diet by growing their own foods. Now, these gardens had to be tended to after they were working in the fields, so they didn't have a lot of time to do this, but they made time to do it because it was important in supplementing their diets. And we also have green onions here. Green onions are important in the South simply because they can be grown so quickly and used, as opposed to a whole onion, which will take many months to be ready to harvest. Green onions are easy to harvest, easy to grow, and we use them in a lot of ways. A lot of people will take the green onion and actually chop it up with the turnip greens and serve them. And I want to mention the peppers. Peppers were very important because, as you see, we have peppers in two forms here. We have dried peppers, and then we have peppers that I've taken and put in a jar with the vinegar. Now, the vinegar and pepper is called a pepper sauce, and it was also eaten along with your collard greens and different vegetables to give it a little bit of flavor. So preserving things in the South was really important to be able to make it through winter. And this is two ways to preserve peppers: by drying them and by putting them in the vinegar. And also, just like with the okra, we have seeds inside of the peppers, and we can take those seeds and replant them. This is where the name heirloom seeds come from, because you're taking seeds from one generation to the next, saving those seeds and replanting those seeds. So you know exactly what you're going to be getting the next year. Also, when we think of preserving, we have herbs. Herbs were very easy to grow, and they were a form of seasonings as well. I have here some dried thyme, and thyme grows pretty much wild. Once you get it established, it'll come back the next year for you in many situations. So the thyme could be dried down and put away and used again. And also, something we don't think much about, the Benny seed. The Benny seed is what we call sesame seeds today, but the name was originally Benny seeds. Benny seeds are still very popular, especially in Louisiana, where they make a Benny seed wafer cracker that is absolutely delicious. But the Benny seeds could be used also to make oil. Sesame seed oil could be made by crushing down those seeds and using that. Also, we have something here that is really special, and I discovered this a few years back. This is called Jamaica Thai Roselle or sorrel. It goes by many different names depending on where you're from. And this is a packet of seeds I was able to find, and I was very excited to be able to find these. And I want to show you, this is a drink that is made by taking the flower seeds from that and soaking it and boiling it in water. If you can see this, it has a red color to it, and I still actually have some of the flowers floating in here. Before you serve this, you would of course take the flowers out. But it is a delicious drink, and it is also said to be very healthy for you. The dried flowers, if you look at them, the dried flowers are beautiful. They're a deep red purple color, and this is how they come. You can buy these locally now here. They're pretty easy to find, but they're easy to grow as well, so I plan to take my seeds and try and grow some myself. And last but not least, I want to look at something that I think is really fascinating. This is a gourd. Now the gourd, you would think, well, what purpose does the gourd have if you can't eat it in Southern cooking? Well, the gourd is still very important because the gourd has several different uses. For one, most of us don't realize that the gourd was used to make the banjo. The banjo is said to have originated actually in Africa and brought over, and it kind of changed the way it looked. It may not have been made from a gourd that is round in this way, but perhaps a gourd that was shaped a little different. But the gourd can be used to make a musical instrument, including the banjo. You can make a shaker instrument with it. The seeds are still inside. The seeds can be saved as well. And also, it was used to make bowls. If you look at the roundness here, if you cut the top of this off, you have a really nice bowl for mixing up things with. It was also used as a dipper to dip water with. So the gourd has many uses, and it's a fascinating thing. And last but not least, I want to show you just a few of the recipe books, cookbooks that were written many years ago. Some of these were written in the late 1800s. Some of them were written by the actual person, because many of the slaves did teach themselves how to read and write. So these are some of the really important early cookbooks, and the ones here in the front were actually things that were not written by them, but orally passed down through time. So I would like to wrap up this program at the time. Thank you so much, and if you have an interest in Extension coming out and presenting this program to your group, by all means contact us here at the Extension office, and we'll be more than happy to come out and do it. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed it.
A single ember that escapes from a wildfire can travel more than a mile. Get Fire Adapted now. Learn simple steps at fireadapted.org.
Mom, can I have $1?
I think my purse is upstairs on the bed.
It's not here.
Check the dining room.
No.
The upstairs closet.
Moms everywhere are
Downstairs
finding ways to
closet.
keep kids active and healthy. Get ideas, get involved, get going at letsmove.gov.
Welcome back. I'm Cindy Suita, the Family and Consumer Science Agent here in Cobb County. And today I'm going to share a recipe with you using one of my favorite fruits, the strawberry. Now, springtime is strawberry time. And here in Georgia, our Georgia-grown strawberries are available starting in mid-February down in the southern part of the state, all the way through late May and sometimes even into early June in the northern part of the state. So when we're looking at strawberries, they are a sweet, delicious treat that contain no fat, no cholesterol, and no sodium. Strawberries are high in vitamin C. In fact, they're so high that strawberries have more vitamin C than a medium orange. They're high in dietary fiber and a good source of manganese and potassium as well. And like all fruits and vegetables, strawberries are rich in antioxidants. A 1 cup serving of strawberries, or 6 to 9 berries depending on their size, is only 50 calories. So you can't beat that for a light, sweet dessert or treat. Strawberries, when you're buying them, you need to look for strawberries that are firm, plump, dry, and well colored. Their tops or their caps should be green and look fresh. When you're buying strawberries, if you purchase them in the container like I have here or any other type of container, pick them up and give them a smell. Strawberries, ripe strawberries, should have a nice, fresh, sweet strawberry smell. When you get your strawberries home, you do want to open the container and take them out and look at them. What you're looking for are strawberries that might have been damaged during shipping or have become molded in some way. You're also looking for strawberries that might have reached their overripeness stage and are beginning to get a little soft. Those are the strawberries that you want to use right away. You can use these overripe strawberries to make something like our strawberry balsamic vinaigrette dressing for your salads. Something easy and quick to do with these overripe strawberries. Once you have your strawberries sorted out and they're ready to be used. Now you should try to use your strawberries within a short period of time. Strawberries are best used when they are used the day that you bring them home. But if you aren't planning on using them right away, go ahead and store them in the refrigerator. When we're storing strawberries, we do want to store our strawberries unwashed with the caps on. When removing the caps, before use, we're actually opening up our strawberries to loss of moisture and also loss of vitamin C. So simply take your unwashed strawberries with caps on, place them in a shallow dish, cover them loosely with a paper towel or maybe some plastic wrap, and keep them in the refrigerator for 1 to 2 days for best use. Now, if you don't plan on using those strawberries in 1 to 2 days, another option might be that you actually freeze your strawberries. When you're preparing your strawberries for use, whether it is eating them fresh or putting them into some other dish or even freezing them, you do then want to take your strawberries and wash them. So strawberries should be placed into a colander and rinsed with cool water. We don't want to let our strawberries sit in water for a prolonged period of time. So once you have them washed, then we can remove the caps. And you can remove the caps simply by taking the top and twisting them. That's pretty simple and easy. Or you can use the tip of a sharp knife, or you can actually use the tip of your vegetable peeler to remove your caps. Once your strawberries are washed and the caps are taken off, then they're ready to use. If you are going to freeze your berries instead of using them right away, you simply take your berries and place them on a shallow pan, such as a cookie sheet, and place them in the freezer. Once your berries are frozen, then you take them off of that cookie sheet, you place them into your permanent container, such as this plastic freezer container or Ziploc bag, seal up the container, and place them back in the freezer. This method of freezing really is great because your berries will remain loose, and then you can simply open your container and pull out the amount that you want to use, and then reseal that container and put them back in the freezer. Today, we are going to be making a dish with fresh berries. And what we'll be doing is we are going to be making a fresh strawberry salsa. And for this salsa, we're going to be using 1 pound of fresh, cut, chopped, and hulled strawberries. We're going to be adding 3 tablespoons of lime juice, a 1/4 teaspoon of sea salt, 4 green onions sliced thinly, and for the heat in this salsa, we're going to be adding 1 jalapeno pepper that is cut and chopped up. Now, if you want a little more heat in that salsa, then you can leave the membrane and the seeds in. So it will kick up that heat just a little bit more. So for the recipe, once again, it's fairly simple. This will make 3 cups, which will serve approximately 8 people. So we have our 1 cup of chopped strawberries. To that, we're going to add our 4 chopped or sliced green onions, our 1 jalapeno pepper, a 1/4 teaspoon, which doesn't sound like a lot, but really is, of our salt. And then to that, we're going to add 3 tablespoons of lime juice. Now, you can use commercially bottled lime juice, but today I'm actually going to take a fresh lime and I'm going to juice that lime and get that fresh lime juice out of there. And then add our 3 tablespoons of freshly squeezed lime juice to our mixture. And that's how simple this salsa is. You'll just take a spoon and combine those ingredients, stirring and mixing them up. And then you can take that strawberry salsa and put it in a decorative container, such as the one we have here. And voila, you have a light, refreshing snack or appetizer at your spring party. Just simply take out your favorite chip, whether it is a tortilla chip, a pita chip, or even a any other kind of chip a pretzel chip. So that is our strawberry salsa, and we hope that you will give our recipe a try. Before we leave today, I would like to share with you some upcoming programs that we have here at the Cooperative Extension Office. In May 7th, the Master Gardeners are doing their garden tour, and tickets are available here at the office. On May 21st, we'll be doing a bluebird walk at the Green Meadows Garden. And if you're interested, please call our office for more information on upcoming programs. As always, our contact number is 770-528-4070, or you can look for us on the web at www.cobbextension.com. Thank you, and hope you join us next month.